Play. I just finished switching out all of your toys. There's new ones everywhere.
Where did my real truck go?
Excuse me?
And my shopping cart.
Do we really need all of this stuff?
I couldn't bring them by myself.
How do people go tiny? How do you encourage exploration, but also stay out of the ER? Hey, slow down, bud. Walking feet. What's in your mouth? Get down from there. That's not safe. Are you overstimulated? You're bored. Are you tired? How do you not overdo it? What about the child leading the activity? What is child-led learning?
I think of child-led learning, certainly in the physical space, as really watching our children practice skills over and over and over again, and using their own challenges that they create for themselves to really get to where they need to be, and learning from their environment. And I think sometimes we're so quick to step in and help them, whether it's a baby who rolls under the couch and doesn't know how to get back out. And sometimes if we just step back a little bit and let our babies or children figure it out, it actually helps them in the long run learn that motor planning process, learn how to use different parts of their body, and how to, motor plan, coordinate their muscles and all of that to get to where they need to be.
I definitely like to step in sometimes and help. There's some moments where I'm like, he probably could have figured this out on his own.
And I like to say, especially when, my children take a lot of risks physically. I'm a big advocate. I'll find my kids walking across the top beam of our swing set, and I'll have friends over and say, like, is your child allowed to do that? And my response is always, and again, this is when your child is old enough to be able to respond to you in this way, but my wording is always, do you feel safe? And now sometimes rarely do I have to step in and say, you don't feel safe. I don't feel safe. But that's very rarely. Usually my kids really do know. They've come to learn their bodies and their balance and their ability to navigate their environment, to know, is this safe for me or is it not? And sometimes when we empower our children to make those choices for themselves with a little bit of coaxing on our end, it really, again, gives them the confidence that they can figure things out themselves and use their judgment to figure out what's safe. And again, that carries long term, hopefully even into teenage years when the challenges become different, but it's still that same thing in their heads.
Helping them listen to their own bodies is super important. So are there like 3 specific tips you can give us for the younger kids to help cultivate the feeling of safety?
What I really think is so important for our younger children is giving them the ability, with the setup of your play environment, to create their own obstacle courses, to create their own movement experiences. And I love doing that with types of toys that allow for a lot of open-ended play. And what I mean by that is, couch cushions, different size blocks, balls, things that they can crawl under or climb over. And it's amazing when we do step back and we encourage a lot of that playtime, and we could even be part of the play, but again, having our children lead what that play will look like and setting up their own physical challenges. Kids often want to physically challenge themselves, and when we give them the tools and the opportunity and the space to do that, again, that really carries over into so many other skills that we hope our kids will gain over their early childhood years.
So with that independent play, if I was going to have my 3-year-old, for example, set up some kind of obstacle course, would I initiate that, or how would you kind of build that independent play?
Right. So what I always did when my kids started preschool is, after school, they'd come home and we went straight down to our basement, and we had all our stuff there that I had all the time. And I would be shocked I would start initially setting up all the obstacle courses and putting things out. And I had poly spots, and I had a slide in my basement, and scooter boards, and a tunnel, and all the different things you would expect a PT to own. But they're all very affordable on Amazon. And I would start with a lot of the setting up and doing those constructive things myself. And slowly, my kids would say, well, I want to add this here, or I want to put this first and this one second. And slowly, that actually starts to change. So we can't always expect that if that's not the culture in our homes, that they're just going to take to it like that. We have a lot of technology around and other things that kids seem much more able to just do themselves. But when we're trying to encourage that independent physical play of getting their energy out, if we start that and we initiate that over time, when we create that culture in our homes, they will take that and start making it their own.
And what should be our expectation of the different ages? Like, how long can they play on their own for?
That really varies based on what a child's interest levels are. There are some kids who can sit and play with cars for a good 45 minutes.
My son.
Right. And I never had that. I never had any kids who were just so focused on whatever it is that they were doing. We needed to go from activity to activity a lot more frequently. So I think that it's very hard to put a specific amount of time, because I think temperament plays such a heavy role. And then when our expectations don't meet what our children are putting forth and what their ability to focus on is, it ruins the dynamic of what, well, I set up this obstacle course, so why aren't you doing this for 20 minutes, right? Maybe they'll do it one time, maybe two times, and maybe the next time it'll be a 30-minute production. I think sometimes if we just, again, try not to over obsess on what our children should be doing, when should they be doing it, and just setting up the environment that we're open to play and excited about it, I think that's great. And you can always follow your child's direction on changing it up a little bit. So if you went from an obstacle course, it's not going well, turn on some music and have a dance party. Just because you think it's something that your child will like, maybe that day they don't, and that's okay. So change it up, do something different, jump in and out of a hula hoop, wave some scarves around and play a freeze dance, and follow your child's lead so that you're actually engaging on their level. And when they find something they're interested in, their attention span will probably expand.
I love that, because there's definitely activities that I've done where I'm like super excited about it, and then he comes in and is like, nope. And I'm like trying to make it happen still. I'm like, come on, play with it. And he's
Right. And you're like, come on, I spent time. And
I know.
I've seen so many, beautiful sensory bins on Instagram. The amount of time that you're putting in as the parent to make something look enjoyable is probably not what your child actually enjoys. They want to just do what they want to do. Sometimes they want you to structure it. And again, that varies day to day. With my own children, that really varies. And the kids that I've worked with, some days it's all child led and some days it's really therapist led.
Mhm.
It's okay to change it up and not have the same expectation every day.
So what if you want to build that independence with them? Is there some tips where, like, if you're sitting in the same play space and you're watching them, do you have any tips like to encourage them to kind of like continue on when they're like 3 years old? Or is it like
Yeah.
you should be engaging with them all the time?
Can you give me an example of, like, just so that I can
So
put that
if
on?
if you pull something out, like I'm gonna think of like a personal example, but if I pull out like an obstacle course and make like the Bosu ball with like a couple blocks, and then that's my son, plays with it, he's 3, for like 5 minutes, or he starts on it and super excited, and I'm sitting on the couch, might be looking at my phone for like 2 seconds, and then I'm wanting him to play independently for a little bit.
Especially with an obstacle course or a scooter board activity or anything physical, sometimes it helps when we give them something that is a start and finish. So if you take puzzle pieces out of a puzzle board and put them on one side and the puzzle board on the other side, and you have them take one piece at a time, that makes the obstacle course something that's part of a start and end. Because I have found, when you tell your children, clean up the big mess, right? It's overwhelming to them. They're like, well, where do I start? When is the end? It's never going to end. All these Legos are going to take me forever. I'm never going to do anything else in my life because I'm cleaning up Legos. But when you say clean up 10 Legos, that feels like something attainable. And so when we put out 7 puzzle pieces on one end and the puzzle board on the other end, okay, now it's actually something that I can focus. Like, this is the goal of this obstacle course. And it helps a child, again, start to realize what they're supposed to do. And then maybe not, they might just do it a few extra times, or say, I finished this puzzle, where's the next puzzle? Because again, it just becomes something attainable. When you go on your treadmill or your elliptical or your Peloton or whatever it is that you're doing, you need to know, like, how many minutes am I supposed to be doing this? You might love it, but you still need, like, what's the goal of me doing this activity. And so I feel like sometimes, again, it doesn't just have to be a puzzle. It could be something like, I have, one of those piggy banks where you put all the coins on one side and the piggy bank on the other, and they take one coin at a time. So I do feel like those things can help. The one thing I would say is, when you notice your child taking 3 pieces at a time, it usually indicates that they're either tired or bored with the activity. And when we, try to slow them down, if they say, oh, can I just take 3 now? It usually means that they're either physically exhausted. Again, that comes from the therapist mind. I pick up those cues of like, are they just done with this activity? Are they physically exhausted? They can't handle it anymore. But it's about trying to marry a child's interests with now the physical challenge that we're trying to give them both at the same time.
Is there something that you feel is great to have in everyone's home that can be used and differentiated across the ages?
Oh, yes. Okay, so I'm going to give a few examples that I think are actually super cheap. And balloons, 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 balloons. Kids love balloons. Babies love them. Kids love them. They are great. And obviously with a baby, we just need to be careful that they don't bite them or anything like that. Watch your child. But I do find that balloons are fabulous for encouraging gross motor movement, visual tracking, visual motor coordination. There's so much that you can get out of a balloon toss activity, or kicking the balloon, or hitting the balloon against the wall. It's a great thing to have around, and they are a few dollars for a package. And so I love having those around. The other one is also bubbles. Similar. Bubbles can really motivate children to do a lot of different things. They love blowing them. They love stomping on them. They love touching them with their fingers, and it helps isolate those fingers. Single leg stance, like a balancing activity where they have to step on them. I think that bubbles are phenomenal. And some other just things that I love having around is toys that can carry you through for several years. Balls are always a good one, similar to balloons. I really love scooter boards. Kids learn to use them even from very early toddlerhood. They can use them on their bellies, on their bottoms, and it's amazing what kids even older will learn to do on a scooter board. So I love that. I love tunnels. So again, it doesn't have to be so expensive and something that is a game per se or a specific toy. It's about things that can be used in different contexts, in a single activity or in an obstacle course or something else, and reusing those items in different ways. I have twins who are almost 10, an almost 8-year-old, and a 4.5-year-old. And let me tell you, we do most of our activities all together. And it's also amazing how I saw my younger children copying what my older children did. So even if I took out yoga cards and we were doing yoga, my youngest, when she was a year and a half, was doing the same things as my older kids because she was following along. So sometimes we're actually really surprised what younger kids can do now that they're exposed to things that are for older kids. But again, bubbles and balloons and scooter boards and tunnels and couch cushions, those are things that somehow they all end up using together, and it creates this camaraderie between siblings that I have really felt that I've really pushed onto my kids in a loving way. And I see now how much they are able to play more and more independently as a group themselves. They've learned how to play together with those items. They set up games and they really do it together. A few other games that I just want to throw out there that don't require really any items at all is, the old school games like Simon Says and Red Light, Green Light. Again, even if your toddler just runs back and forth while your older kid is actually following along, it's totally fine because it's part of the game and it makes it fun. Follow the leader, where they're listening to directions. They're using their bodies in conjunction with those directions that are being given. And those are skills that I don't think we're focusing on enough today. It's almost like, these toys in the stores, and I've been there too. I want to go buy a toy for my child. And I actually go up and down the aisles and I'm like, how is this toy different than another toy that I already have? And most of them aren't. What our kids are really missing is a lot of that play, that creative play, that Red Rover. And again, Simon Says, those games where we sit on the floor and we just are there. And again, whether we're part of it or we want our kids to just do it together, it now takes more practice than I think it did in the past. But if we set up that culture in our own homes, it does carry over. It takes time, but they do get there when we set up that culture.
I love that because I definitely, when you said that stuff, I was even thinking, I was like, when was the last time I even played like Duck Duck Goose or something,
Yeah.
music
Yeah.
chair.
And we do those things. And again, now that my kids are getting even a little bit older, I find, after school, it's a lot more homework now. I feel like with my 4-year-old, she's getting less of that than my older kids did, because now after school, I have 3 sets of homework to do. And, it's just more complicated. But, on Sundays, especially now in the pandemic, we're not going anywhere. Unfortunately, we're not seeing family. And this is the time, for better or worse, that we can concentrate on our own families, and that camaraderie that we're building with our children as a sibling relationship. And those games really do create that. There are fights along the way. You didn't tap me hard enough, or you tapped me too hard. We definitely, it's not like it's all perfect and rainbows, but again, that's how kids learned how to problem solve and how to communicate with each other. Not when they're on their Kindles or iPads, which my kids do also, but those interactions, whether it's they cheated or they're laughing their faces off because they're so happy with it. Again, that's what builds social skills. That's what gets our kids really learning all what we really want them to learn. And I think, again, that's all about the culture that we have in our homes.
3 tips for setting up a good play space.
Keeping a lot of items that are open play items out organized, actually. And I'm not the most organized person, but I think if things look messy, kids don't engage with them, unfortunately. But when the blocks are, stacked to the side, and there's, balloons where they know that they can get them, but it's cleaner and a little bit more organized, I think that it feels like a place that they can engage in, and they can create their own world, rather than when it's cluttered from playing yesterday. Unfortunately, we do have to keep it, with their help, a clean space where they can access their open-ended toys. So I think that that's, my biggest tip. I also feel like we need to keep things in those organized, clean ways, but really at their height accessible. We don't want to always be called over, "Mommy, I can't get that from the shelf." If we want them to go play, we do need to set up the environment where they can access those things and know where they can find the art supplies that they're allowed to touch on their own, or the games that we want them to be able to use on their level, so that they can do that. And then the last thing I would say is always encouraging them to do things that are challenging themselves, but also, do you feel safe? And having that balance of trying to promote that with our children.
What are your thoughts on rotating toys?
I mean, I wish I was that that influencer who is always on top of my playroom space and rotating things out. Um, I'm less of that and more like the Duck Duck Goose Mom.
Yeah.
But I know I but I do actually listen, when I've taken toys out that are even more babyish toys, all of a sudden my kids start playing with them again. So there definitely is something to that, of rotating out toys. But to take the pressure off the parents, I think that it's really about setting up the environment that works best for you. If you have the time and the dedication to rotate out your toys, go for it.
Yeah.
And make that your priority of how you're setting up the play space. If that's just not something that you have time for, then again, prioritize what it is that you think your play space and how your family functions, and go with that. I feel like that's the advice that I need to tell myself, because there is a lot of this, this could work, that could work. And I've worked with so many kids. My own children are each different personalities. Some kids need to know that their stuff is always there. There are those kids that need to know, like, I love this toy and it's never going to disappear. And other kids need something new every minute. So I think it's about knowing your children, knowing how they engage with their play space, and doing what works best for you. Rotating toys out is awesome. And if you can't do that, I think it's fine.
That's really helpful because I think there's a lot of pressure for that. And it's
Yeah, I'm always hesitant to be like, you should do it. Yeah, I think all these tips are great, but it's about how it functions in your life. I do not have time to
yeah.
go around my playroom like, okay, let's find the place for these toys on this shelf now. Like, I don't have time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that, right?
That makes me feel so much better because it's like by the time you're done rotating, it's like, when do I have to do this again?
And then your kid comes back, oh, where's that toy? Okay. Like, but
Yeah.
and then,
Instagram.
and again, like then you get to this point where you're like, wait a second, Instagram told me my kids would play better if I did this, but
Yeah,
they're not. Uh-oh.
exactly. Oh, that's so funny.
Like,
Advice for new parents.
this comes from the mommy place and the therapist place, which is really trust your gut and go with what works for your children. I am a physical therapist and I'm partnered with my partner Mary, who's an occupational therapist. So together, our goal with Tots on Target on Instagram is to really empower parents with how they can help their babies, toddlers, and children reach their milestones, develop, and really do that through play and with the knowledge that they have on how to structure their days to best help their children.